All right, I think we can get started. Welcome everybody and to today's Together We Mentor Pharmacy School webinar. Today we actually have a lot of great panelists who will be joining us from UCSF, Western University Health Sciences. But before we go over the introductions, let me share with you all a short presentation. So before I do that, my name is Jonah Gonzalez. I'm the VP of Mentorship, and I've been with Mi Mentor for about a year and a half, and I represent the SoCal board. Just to tell you a little bit about the outline and the structure of this webinar. So we'll go over the mission and vision of Mi Mentor just for all of you to be a little bit familiar of what we do in case this is your first event attending virtually. And then after, we'll hear from our speakers, starting with Yvonne and then ending with Jocelyn. And all of them will be introducing their background, their sort of pathway to, pharmacy school and why they chose that path, and really just providing their narrative. And then afterwards, we'll have time for Q&A. So if you have any specific questions, if your last name is from A to K, you can chat your questions to Jessica Rico. She's one of our ambassadors for SoCal Board. And if your last name is from L to Z, you can definitely chat your questions to Melissa Venegas. Afterwards, if you really want our speakers, contact information, we'll be providing that once you complete the post-event survey. So that's something that will close out at the end of the event. All right, so who is Mi Mentor? If this is your first time joining, so our mission is to really develop and support innovative mentorship opportunities that will inspire the next generation of diverse healthcare leaders and professionals for underserved communities. And with our vision is a world where all aspiring and current health professionals have a mentor. So in order to achieve that, we have a lot of different events. And of course, like due to the pandemic, we've been having a lot of events virtually. So something that we really want to cater to is ensuring that we also representing different healthcare professions. So that includes public health, pharmacy school, all these other different touch points that really provide an impact towards our underserved communities. All right, so with that shared, I'm going to pass this over to Yvonne Alva, who will provide us her presentation.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. And thank you for joining. This is actually a very great thing that's being done. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, I studied at UC Santa Barbara. I got my BS in biological sciences. While at UC Santa Barbara, I figured that I wanted to go into pharmacy because I was part of the pharmacy organization on campus. And I just went to my first meeting and just continued to go to meetings, meet different pharmacists, and I really enjoyed listening to how they give back to the community. Along with that, something that I'm really proud of that I did there is mentoring. So I helped start a program called Bio Mentors at UC Santa Barbara with one of my professors, and the purpose of that was to start a program that would help first generation students make it through the biological sciences major, because there was a huge dropout rate of Latinos, for example, which is something that I definitely witnessed and was very impacted by during my first few years at UC Santa Barbara. So from there, I also did grow a big liking for mentoring. Moving on, I did graduate, and one big thing that I did after graduation was I was a case manager at the Boys and Girls Club. And just to continue my path with mentoring, I organized a large event with UCLA City Lab. It's a nice organization at UCLA campus. I don't know if any of you are aware of it. And there, I was able to get the Boys and Girls Clubs of San Pedro, Wilmington, Port of LA, and it was about 80 students that went to UCLA, and they got exposure to health sciences, and just like to get an overall view of what it's like to be at a university. So that was something that I feel really helped me in my applications for pharmacy school, because it showed that I give back to the community, not only just to get into pharmacy school, but just as something that I'm passionate about. Then I got hired as a study coordinator at the Lundquist Institute, where I worked in clinical trials with the respiratory and division of HIV. Here's where I developed a huge passion to provide care for people living with HIV. And I still continue to have that passion. And I'm hoping to carry it forward, becoming an ambulatory care pharmacist, hopefully. Moving on, I finally made it to pharmacy school, yay. But I really think that the thing that really got me into pharmacy school is just my passion for patient care, showing that I care about the community, demonstrating my interest, that I'm interested in medication, interested in patients. So I really think that those were big pointers that helped me get into pharmacy school. While at pharmacy school, I am still in pharmacy school, but I am involved in extracurricular activities such as a medical Spanish course for pharmacists on campus, where I'm a facilitator. And I've also volunteered at various health fairs, which again, a passion for serving the community. And I am part of a new project that just got started to teach ambulatory care pharmacists medical Spanish. So we're working on that. Currently, we have hypertension, smoking cessation, and diabetes counseling points for that we're hoping to get out there soon to teach ambulatory care pharmacists that don't speak Spanish, so that they can provide better care to the Spanish speaking communities. And yeah, so moving forward, 2021, big thing going on right now is just residency applications and the interview process. Hoping to get something there, but just know that once you graduate from pharmacy school, it's not the end. There's still other things that you can do, such as residency. And I hope that it's something that a lot of you look forward to. So before you start pharmacy school, start thinking about, how can I get to residency? So yeah, that's the end of my story.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. And just as a reminder for folks, feel free to chat in your questions to Jessica and Melissa, depending on your last name. And to save some time and leave more time for questions, let's move forward to our next panelist, Leslie Banuelos. Hey, Leslie, are you there?
I'm so sorry.
There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, hi. My name is Leslie Banuelos, and I'm a second-year pharmacy student at Western University. I graduated from UC Riverside in 2017 with a degree in biochemistry. I'm a first-generation student. Both of my parents were born in Mexico, and when I went to UC Riverside, I moved on campus and kind of had some difficulties adjusting to being away from home. I'm also the oldest child that my parents have, so they were kind of learning with me as well. Everything was definitely very new process. So I did have some adjustments to make, and I feel like I didn't do as well as I wanted to in undergrad, but nevertheless, I'm still here and I still made it through. At UC Riverside, I was involved with the pre-pharmacy club, and I volunteered at Riverside Community Hospital, where I first got exposed to the field of pharmacy. So then when I graduated, I knew that I wanted to pursue pharmacy, and I needed to make changes in some of my grades. So I started retaking classes at community college to help improve those grades, since Western U does end up swapping those grades for the ones that you get if they're better. And I started volunteering with Flying Samaritans. It's a nonprofit organization. A lot of colleges have it. I did it at Cal State Long Beach, but I know Cal State Fullerton, UCI, UCR, I think UC San Diego have it, and they help to create free medical clinics in Mexico. So I was able to help out and we did one in Tijuana, and then we established a new clinic in Tecate. And that was honestly one of the things that really pushed me even more to pursue pharmacy. It's such a beautiful thing to be able to give back to the community that, you know, my parents are from, and to be able to assist others and connect with those people. And so then in September, I started working at an independent pharmacy, and I really enjoyed it there. That's kind of where I gained my knowledge of the pharmacy field, but I definitely wanted something at a more fast-paced environment. So I started working at CVS Pharmacy in April. And then once I hit 240 hours, I wasn't a technician, so I was able to get my license that way from the Board of Pharmacy to be a technician. And then I ended up applying in July of 2018 to Western University, and I only applied to one school. I visited the campus about 3 times before I applied, and I just kind of knew when I went to the other schools that Western was the one that felt most like home, and I only applied there as for early decision, and I ended up getting in October 2018. And so right now I'm a second year pharmacy student, and I work at UCI Medical Center. I worked at CVS Pharmacy all of my first year. And then right now, I'm like Ivana, I'm also a facilitator for the Essential Medical Spanish program. And I recently became co-chair. And something that I started about a year ago was mentoring pre-pharmacy students through my blog at PharmD to be 2023. And I've really enjoyed doing that. And a lot of students have been asking me questions on applications, and I've been able to help out a lot of students. So if any of you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. And I'm also associated at school with CSHP and ROCAI. So I think that even though I had my difficulties in undergrad, I think that your performance in undergrad doesn't correlate to how you can or will do in pharmacy school, and don't let that hold you back.
Thank you so much, Leslie, and such great advice. Thank you for sharing your path to pharmacy school. And next we have Nora Cortes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nora Cortes, and I am in my final year of pharmacy school at UCSF. I graduated from UCLA with a bachelor's in biology in 2015. But prior to that, I think it was 8th grade when I kind of had the idea of going into pharmacy school. I'm also a first generation college student, so I didn't really have any mentors in my life who were pharmacists. But in 8th grade, it was when I think one of my teachers had me do a career search, and I found pharmacy. And ever since then, I've kind of kept it in the back of my head. Throughout UCLA, I joined the Pre-Pharmacy Society, and that's where I learned about the different fields within the field of pharmacy, and that kind of motivated me even more to keep pursuing that. I was also involved with Mentors Empowering and Nurturing Through Education, an organization at UCLA that mentored students or high school students from the eastern side of LA, which was a great experience. It kind of gave me, I'm from the Central Valley, so here I feel like it's very different to the urban areas in LA, so it kind of opened my perspective as to what kind of populations I wanted to work with in the future as a pharmacist. And upon graduating from UCLA, I was kind of, I don't want to say discouraged, but it was a little bit discouraging just because I hadn't performed as well as I wanted to, and I wasn't sure if pharmacy was something that that was going to happen for me. So I started working as a health service specialist at Planned Parenthood and where I got a lot of patient experience. And I was like, okay, like maybe I can go into nursing school or maybe even PA school if, pharmacy cannot happen. But as I continued to work there, I realized, one, how important medications are and how much patients don't know about their medications. And I also realized, okay, I don't want to do suturing or do pap smears like these nurse practitioners are doing. So I decided to actually pursue getting into pharmacy school. So then I volunteered at Kern Medical Center, which is a county hospital where I live. I volunteered at the inpatient pharmacy where I delivered medications to each of the floors after I got off of my work at Planned Parenthood. And I also finished taking all of the prerequisites for pharmacy school at the local Cal State and the community college. I decided to also take a couple of chemistry courses just as a refresher because I thought, okay, this will help me when I do get into pharmacy school. And finally in 2018, I got into UCSF, and I am now part of the first graduating three-year program class. There I was involved with Operation Immunization and Project HIV, where I was able to interact with the Bay Area community through that work. I was also part of the National Hispanic Pharmacist Association. We were actually the starting chapter at UCSF. And right now, as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm in my final year and doing rotations here off of UCSF Fresno, and also applying to residency, and hope to become a ambulatory care pharmacist. And I'm mostly interested in working with chronic disease management, where I can continue to help patients who basically look like my parents, who don't have the resources or the knowledge to navigate the healthcare system. And that's what I hope to do. I hope to be that liaison. So that's it. If you guys have any questions, just feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to help. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nora, for sharing your pathway to pharmacy school. And I want to say next is Jocelyn Peraza. Hi, Jocelyn.
Hi. Start. Hello, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Peraza. I'm a first-year pharmacy student at Western University of Health Sciences. I am a first-generation Salvadorian American. I was raised in Southgate, California, if anybody knows where that is. It's a predominantly low-income Latinx community in the south of East LA. So I graduated from Southeast High School in 2013 and was accepted into UC Berkeley the same year. So I moved 600 miles away from home on my own at the age of 17. So my time at UC Berkeley was very challenging. The number one thing, I faced a massive culture shock. I felt alone, I felt lost, and worst of all, I was very ashamed to ask for help. So I think that was my biggest downfall in that. But I always knew that I wanted to go into healthcare and I wanted to help communities like the one I grew up in. But I did not know what exactly I wanted to do. It wasn't until my junior year in 2016 at UC Berkeley that I came across Global Brigades. So Global Brigades is a nonprofit medical brigade that aims to empower volunteers and under-resourced communities to resolve global health and economic disparities. So I went to Honduras for a week where I worked alongside medical professionals to serve communities in Honduras who did not have proper access to medical care. So this was a very important turning point for me, I think. It helped me realize that in the future, I want to dedicate my life to being part of more medical brigades and helping communities in Latin America, specifically in El Salvador, where my parents are from. So it also helped me see that in the meantime, I can work to resolve healthcare disparities in my own community. Helped me reflect that even though the community I grew up in had more resources than this community in Honduras, there was still a lot of work to be done here. So Southgate is a medically underserved area with few primary care medical offices. There's no urgent care centers, no hospitals. And I often saw how my own parents and family struggled to communicate with medical providers because the providers didn't speak Spanish, they didn't speak their language. So as a bilingual individual, I want to be able to provide communities with the healthcare they need and deserve. But another thing that the medical brigade also showed me was what it meant to be a pharmacist. So growing up, I always thought that a pharmacist was just someone that handed you your medication at a retail pharmacy, and that was it. But working alongside the pharmacist at this medical brigade, it really ignited my interest in the career as a pharmacist because I saw the patient interaction, how you can truly make a difference in someone's lives. So when I returned home from the brigade, I signed up to volunteer at a local hospital in Oakland in order to get some experience working in a hospital setting. So from there, I joined the Pre-Pharmacy Society at UC Berkeley and attended the Northern California Pre-Pharmacy Symposium. So it's a really big event that I really recommend. But to be honest, I was not an active member of the Pre-Pharmacy Society at UC Berkeley. I did only go to 2 meetings. So even though I had a general idea that I wanted to go into pharmacy, I was still lost. I remember going to this event and the representatives from each school would ask me what I was looking for in a pharmacy school, and I had no idea what to say. I felt embarrassed that I was so unprepared compared to the rest of the students at the event. So after this event, I began to do my own research and realized that I should get some pharmacy experience to be certain that this was what I wanted to do. So I went to an alumni meet and greet hosted by the Biology Scholars Program at UC Berkeley, and there was one pharmacist in attendance. So I gathered up all my courage and began to network with her. So we exchanged contact information, and I learned that she was actually the pharmacy manager for CVS Pharmacy and was actually looking to hire someone. So I was hired as a pharmacy clerk at CVS Pharmacy, and I worked as the pharmacy clerk for a couple of months until I had worked enough hours to apply for my pharmacy technician license. So it was here that I met an intern that had just graduated from Western University. And hearing about how much he loved Western, I began to look more into the program, and I soon realized that this is a program that I wanted to go into. So I graduated from UC Berkeley in 2017 with a major in molecular cell biology, with an emphasis in biochemistry, and a minor in nutritional science. Since I decided later on in my time at Berkeley that I did want to go into pharmacy school, I didn't take all the requirements that I needed to apply to pharmacy school, and I also had a lot of bad grades classes that I had to retake. So after I graduated, I immediately enrolled in community college in Oakland and continued working as a pharmacy technician. So I stayed up north for a year after I graduated and then decided to move back home to SoCal in 2019. And here I enrolled in the Long Beach City College to finish my requirements and began working as a pharmacy technician at CVS in Anaheim. And after I finished my requirements, I applied early decision to Western University and got accepted. So now I'm working as a pharmacy intern in CVS Pharmacy. I volunteer at vaccination clinics, I facilitate medical Spanish workshops, and I'm the director of community outreach for the Western U chapter of California Society of Health System Pharmacists. And I am currently applying to inpatient hospital internship programs for my second year of pharmacy school. So if you got anything from my long story, I want you to know that it's okay to ask for help. Don't be like me. And at the end of the day, even though you may have something planned and it's okay if it doesn't work out that way, because I think if you set your mind to do something, you'll eventually get there. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn, and such a really great message to provide to our attendees here. I'm going to give the floor to Rodolfo. Rodolfo, I think you should be able to share your screen now. Let me know if you're not.
Awesome. Thank you. I just want to see if you can hear me. Sorry for late arrival. My name is Rodolfo. I'm a third-year pharmacy student, so I'll go ahead and share my screen really quick with you all. Okay, let me know if you're able to view that.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So my name is Nora Gonzalez, yeah, third-year pharmacy student. So I graduated from Fresno State. So I'm actually from Fresno, California. I was raised in Fresno, born in Mexico. So I did go most of my years in undergrad as an undocumented student, as well as going to grad school as an undocumented student. So if there's any questions regarding that matter in terms of financial aid and how I navigated that, I'm happy to answer any of those questions as well. So I graduated from Fresno State in 2018. So I took about 5 years. I graduated with the Bachelor of Chemistry. I was really excited to be at Fresno State, mainly because it helped me in terms of solidifying my idea, my thoughts that I really wanted to do pharmacy. And it all kind of started with HCOP, Health Careers Opportunity Program, which is a program I was highly involved with as a tutor, mentor for other students in undergrad, as well as undocumented students that were interested in STEM in general. So it was a really great program that helped me, exposed me a lot to the area that I, not necessarily to pharmacy. That was just quite the interesting fact about that was that I didn't have many opportunities to do pharmacy. It was really difficult to get some experience in that area, but overall it kind of helped me in terms of shadowing different physicians, different areas that were highly involved with healthcare, and that kind of helped me, find out a little bit more about the career that I wanted. It wasn't up until my last year that I was actually able to gain a little internship type experience at Valid Children's here in Fresno, and it was quite the experience that for that summer, and it also helped me in terms of getting us a job, not as a technician. I didn't work as a pharmacy technician. I worked as a clerk in a independent pharmacy here in Fresno, and it was quite interesting because I was able to do lots of the technician work, mainly because it was an independent pharmacy. So I saw patients that spoke Spanish. It was a value to me to be able to utilize my Spanish in that area, because I found it that patients felt more comfortable in that area as well. And that's kind of what I really liked about that job that I had for that 1 year. After that, I decided to apply to pharmacy school. I wanted to take a gap year, but I really wanted to push through. So I decided just to continue on further on. So I applied to pharmacy school. I applied to 4 schools: USC, it was UCSF, Loma Linda, and I believe UOP. I got into all 4. And I obviously chose UCSF mainly because of financial issues, as well as because it was a great school that the school that I really wanted to go to. Now UCSF, kind of like Nora, we were both in the same organization called LAPS, Latino Association of Pharmacy Students. It all started off with LAPS, and then over the course of being part of the organization, Nora was vice president, I was president. We were able to transition labs into a national organization. So that was quite the experience in terms of getting this small student-run organization and helping it build over to a national organization, which has already presented as NHPA, National Hispanic Pharmacist Association. So it's now it's more of a national chapter. It has more reputation, and it's building that reputation now at UCSF. So it was a great start for it to help build more connections, have more of this Latinx individuals and as well as pharmacists come into this platform and play a big role, because before it didn't really have much connections. Now we feel like it has more of a reputation that helps us stand out a lot more as a school, as well as the organization and chapter has more leadership positions available for students to actually gain that experience, and not necessarily had to be Latinx or Latino in order to be part of the org. So that was quite the experience, and it was amazing that we were able to establish that at UCSF. Similar to Nora, we're both in the 3-year program at UCSF. We're currently on rotations. I believe we started last year, around July or so. So now we're almost towards the end, about to finish in May. Right now, I think she's also on one of her off blocks. We have an off block. Usually it's 8 rotations, but they had to cut it down to 6 due to COVID. Right now, my main focus in pharmacy, I didn't apply to residency mainly because I didn't see myself of value in terms in the hospital setting. I really enjoyed a community pharmacy rotation that I had where I was able to see about 95% of the patients were Hispanic, spoke Spanish. It was in the area of mainly like an area that's very rural in terms, I think Nora is from Delano, so it's a community pharmacy that I really enjoyed it there. Treating the patients was really amazing. I felt comfortable with them. I felt like my Spanish was being utilized as much as possible compared to a hospital setting where I tried. I didn't feel that was an area of interest for me, mainly due to not being able to utilize the Spanish that I wanted to use as a pharmacist and the values that I hold as a pharmacist, being able to treat this population that's underserved. You don't have many pharmacists that are bilingual, and you have the patient right in front of you. So you're able to make that connection and those lifestyle changes. So I really enjoyed the area. I did not do residency. After graduating in May this year, I plan to apply to community pharmacy. I don't want to stay in the city. I want to be outside of the city, more in a rural area or town, mainly where I've seen that there's a need for bilingual pharmacists, and not necessarily have one in mind right now, but that's the goal for right now. And I'm happy to answer any other questions. Now, stop sharing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rodolfo, and thank you for everybody, the panelists who really provided a really great presentation and advice and key messages to the participants here. So, that's their pathway. And if you have any questions, feel free to message them to Jessica or Melissa. But we're now going to move forward to the Q&A section. So I'll pass it over to Melissa. I think she has a couple questions from her end.
Yeah, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for presenting your journeys. I do have a couple questions here from the chat box. So for any of the panelists, feel free to just jump in and answer if you feel like you could answer it. So this first one is it better to apply to pharmacy schools as soon as possible during undergrad after completing your prerequisites, or is it better to apply after receiving your bachelor's degree?
Take a hit at this one. So the question is if it's better to apply right after getting your bachelor's and just doing prerequisites, correct?
Right.
Okay. So I actually did have a few classmates that only did prerequisites from community college, and they were able to get into pharmacy school. Now, I am going to say that it wasn't very many that I knew. It was probably only about 5 in my class. But there were some other students that had done not specifically a science major, and they did something like psychology or majored in communications, and they just did the prereqs at a community college after getting a bachelor's in something else. And there were a few of those, maybe about 20, but for the most part, most of them had a bachelor's in some like science, like biology or chemistry. I know that right now there's a lot of pharmacy schools in California. So maybe look into what the other schools are the kinds of students that they're accepting. But if you do want to get into a more competitive school, maybe consider getting a bachelor's in something. And also, if you're planning to go into residency, I do know that each school has their own residency acceptance rate. So that's something to look into as well when you're applying to pharmacy schools. I hope I answered that question.
I think just to piggyback off of that, personally, I took 2 years off after graduating from UCLA, and I think that benefited me a lot. I think my maturity level definitely increased, and I learned a lot from working full time. And I was also able to, um, retake those chemistry classes that I didn't do so well in when I was an undergrad. But most importantly, I think the having experience in the workforce was very beneficial to me, because when I got into pharmacy school, I was just ready to tackle any of the schoolwork that was brought to me because I had taken those couple of years off. So I wasn't as, I would say, stressed out about it.
I definitely agree with that too.
Just to add, also, I feel like similarly to others' experiences, during that time that I took off, I also took 2 years off technically from when I graduated to when I entered pharmacy school. And that's kind of where I gained a lot of my pharmacy experience. Although I did volunteering during undergrad, my exposure wasn't a lot. And I do have classmates that in their first semester and my first semester of pharmacy school, they ended up leaving because they realized that pharmacy wasn't for them. So I just worry that maybe if you aren't sure or haven't experienced working the pharmacy and aren't sure if you're going to like it, if you're going to want to make that commitment right away.
I can probably add on to the side where I didn't take any gap years. I went straight into just that goal. So during my undergrad, my final year, I kind of had thoughts if I wanted to take a gap year, just go with the application process. I can say that it was there was quite pressure while trying to complete all my classes, as well as going through the application cycle and trying to kind of find time for interviews in a way, and asking professors if I can actually take some time off, and kind of just, it was a lot about time management going through that whole process. But I can say that it was definitely rewarding. It kept me on my toes. It kept me in that school mode. Right after graduating, it probably took like a month or two off, or that small break that I had, and then I went straight to pharmacy school. I was still in that school mode. It does get tiring. I can say that for sure, because you don't get much of a break, considering now that it switched over to a 3-year program at UCSF. It definitely did make the days a lot longer, but in the end, it's very rewarding, and you get to end a lot earlier, and you definitely feel like you actually did push through. And but I really wouldn't go against taking time off as well as taking a gap year, because it helps you recollect your thoughts and think of, is this really what I want to do after I graduate, or if I want to do pharmacy.
Thank you very much for your answers. I actually have a question that touches on what you were mentioning right now. So the question that I received, it says, how can we get some experience as undergrads? Also, how can we get strong letters of recommendation from others if we don't know any pharmacists?
I can try to answer this one. From personal experience, I didn't do the traditional path of working at a pharmacy right after. I've only volunteered. So that's a big thing right there. You can volunteer. You don't necessarily need to have a job. But yeah, like you asked, if you're an undergrad, I did have some friends that did work as clerks, and they did work as during their undergraduate school. So it's something to look into, or volunteering, like I said. And through volunteer experience, you can also get a letter of rec from a pharmacist. I have one letter of rec from a pharmacist, and the others were from doctors, because I had more experience with doctors. So they don't all have to be from pharmacists. Oh, and get a letter of rec from a professor. Just be afraid to ask. Just get some courage and ask your professor, hey, is there anything that I can help you with? Is there anything that I can get involved with you? I would really like a letter of recommendation. Just speak up, don't be afraid. Even if you have a C in the class, like you'd be surprised how professors will be more than happy to help you. And they do notice that there is a lack of Hispanics in the science field. So if you're Hispanic and you approach them, or you're people of color, we're so rare in the pharmacy profession. So if you approach your professor, you'd be surprised, and they'd be so willing to help you.
I'm sort of adding on to that, what you said last, Yvonne, that professors do get excited when they see you are a person of color trying to go into this field. I think that was something that really helped me when I was applying to CVS Pharmacy, because the pharmacy manager there was also a Latinx, and she was excited that I was also Latina, spoke Spanish, and was going into this field. So I think that really also helped me get my foot in the door. But I think if you do want to apply to work, to get some pharmacy experience before pharmacy school, you can start off as a clerk. You don't necessarily have to take the license exam to get your pharmacy technician license. You can work a certain amount of hours and get it through your job, like I got it through CVS. So there's definitely other ways of getting it. Look online. A lot of CVSs are hiring. You can just call the store and say, hey, are you looking for a clerk? I'm interested in going into the pharmacy field. So I think it's just important to really put yourself out there.
Cool. Just to add on to what Jocelyn and Yvonne had said, it's definitely putting yourself out there. For my personal experience, I didn't get much experience in pharmacy up to my last year. I did get that 1 year working as a clerk and that small little internship at Bachelor Children's, which was quite a lot actually compared to what actual experience you can get. But to be honest, it only happened because I put myself out there. That summer, I think a few months before that summer, I reached out. I was focused on calling independent pharmacies because I knew those were the pharmacies that would probably take me in a lot quicker and allow me to do a lot more than just be a clerk. That I know that I would be able to do technician work, although they're not supposed to, but you would still get that experience. And I got that experience. I enjoyed it. I spoke to patients in Spanish. I called so many independent pharmacies in my area, and I just gave them a call. I just introduced myself, who I was, what I wanted to do, what was my goal. And I specified that I'm bilingual, I speak Spanish, and I can be a great asset to your pharmacy. That's what I did. I got rejected to a few pharmacies, mainly because I think there was capacity issues. But luckily, I landed one 5 minutes from my house. And it was a pharmacy that I was a clerk at. I began to work and I enjoyed it a lot. So definitely put yourself out there. Don't be scared to take a no or just be rejected. It's part of the process, and eventually you'll get to one that you'd like. And from letters of recs, I didn't have none from a pharmacist. I mainly got mine from my professor. And two, I had really great advisors from a program that I was part of, HCOP. And those are two great advisors that provided me a letter of rec. I asked, would you be able to provide me a strong letter of recommendation? Would you be comfortable writing it for me? And those are kind of like the main words that I had to say in terms of them being able to give me a good letter of rec. So yeah, I definitely asked professors that I knew. And like you mentioned, don't be afraid to ask them.
So just to piggyback off of that, I'm not sure what the requirements have changed a lot, but I did not get any letters of recommendations from any pharmacists. I actually got it from my manager at Planned Parenthood and from a PA that I worked with closely at Planned Parenthood and from a professor. And I remember asking the professor was really nerve-wracking. I'm more on the introverted side. So I remember when I was going into his office, I was kind of like, will you write me a letter of recommendation? And he was just like he was just kind of like, why are you nervous? Like, I know, like, this is like my job. Like, I like to hear for you. I'm here to do this for you. He was very eager to write me a letter of recommendation.
Thank you so much for answering that question. So this next question, I actually got a variation of it quite a few times. And it's, what other fields of pharmacy are there in addition to retail, like being a pharmacist at CVS? Or could you talk a little bit about the different pathways a pharmacist can take? And is it true that the role of the pharmacist is expanding?
I'll go first. I'll do this one because it really excites me to talk about ambulatory care. Working at the division at the HIV division clinical trial site, I got to see an ambulatory care pharmacist there for the first time, and that's when I first fell in love with it. But ambulatory care, pretty much, just to tell you what it is. So you are pretty much like a doctor. But you're specializing in something. So for example, like that pharmacist was specializing in HIV. I did a rotation with a pharmacist that specialized in diabetes, high blood pressure, and there are other pharmacists that specialize in but HIV and other infectious diseases. There's psychology specialized ambulatory care pharmacists. So and what you're doing is you're managing the patients that get referred. Okay, so let me give you an example. So the doctor has a right, and their patients have diabetes and they just cannot control them. And the pharmacist is a specialist in diabetes medications. So they refer their uncontrolled diabetes patients to the pharmacist that specialize in diabetes that can bring down their A1C to where they to be at goal. And so as a pharmacist, you are seeing the patient, you order their medications, you can increase the dose, decrease the dose, add a new medication, remove a medication. If they need to get labs done, you order the labs depending on what they need. So you're pretty much managing the patient in a specialized field. So yeah, that's ambulatory care. I think others here work at hospitals, so they can talk more about the inpatient role.
So I can talk a little bit about the inpatient clinical pharmacy role. So at the hospital, there's different floors, like for example, the emergency department, the ICU, and there's pharmacists. Usually, I mean, different hospitals have different systems, but there's pharmacists in each of those floors, and a lot of the times they round with the patient, they round with the physicians, the dietitians every morning. They go through all the patients. They do conversions from IV to PO, any renal dosing calculations for the medications they do. If, let's say, a doctor has a question about what medication a patient should go on, then they'll go to the pharmacist, ask them the question, and they'll work that out. Yeah, that's basically what a clinical pharmacist would do at the hospital. There's also pharmacists in what they call a main pharmacy, where they're just going through medication orders and just verifying, making sure that all medications are correct for each patient. And that's basically when I was volunteering at the inpatient hospital pharmacy. That's where I was taking a lot of the medications that would be ordered from that pharmacy that would, after they were verified by the pharmacist, I would take those to each of the floors and deliver to the patients.
Just to add to that, so I work at a hospital right now, and I'm part of a year internship program at UC Irvine Medical Center, and it's not part of my program, but just something that I wanted to do was to come in every Friday to shadow the clinical pharmacist, because that's something that I want to pursue. And right now, some of the fields that I'm interested in is pediatrics and emergency medicine and critical care. And so my mentor pharmacist that I shadow every Friday is a NICU pharmacist. So she usually is on the NICU floor, and that's where she stays. And so some of the things that I've been able to do with her is round, like Nora said, with the physician team. Whenever we have like an interesting case, they all consult and, talk about what kind of medications they think that the pharmacist wants to start. Another thing is every time that there's a code blue, a pharmacist has to respond. And so I've been able to attend code blues and administer medications, time the medications. So that's a really big part of pharmacy too in the inpatient setting. And especially right now with COVID, there's probably could be 10 code blues a day. And so yeah, and it's something that I think is really growing in the pharmacy field. Something a lot of people ask questions about is saturation. And I think that although maybe community is becoming a little bit more saturated, there's a lot of growth in other fields. I mean, clinical pharmacy is just one of them, but I know there is industrial pharmacists and many other fields that you could go into as well.
Sorry, I wanted to add something real quick. So I feel like as a first year student, I'm learning about the new roles a pharmacist can go into like every day. Western University actually offers an elective that shows you each time a new pharmacist from a different field presents on their profession. And we recently heard from an oncology pharmacist, a pharmacist that works in the mail order. So basically in every field that you can imagine, a pharmacist can go into it. Academics, as Leslie mentioned it, industry, you can go into policy making, you can work for the government, just everything, to be honest.
And I can talk a little bit more about the industry side because I had a rotation at Gilead Sciences, and I got to learn from there what it is to be a pharmacist in the medical affairs team. So it was the pre-exposure prophylaxis medical affairs team. And what I found really cool is that they pretty much what you say gets done. And what I mean by that is that they're in charge of reviewing the package insert. So when you get a medication and you see that big paper that comes with the medication, the medical affairs team is the one that gets to review that with the FDA. They're also reviewing all of the pamphlet that you get for medications, just to make sure that the clinical stuff on that pamphlet is correct. They're also involved, there's a medical science liaison, which pharmacists can also go into, that go and talk to the doctor about a new medication, and they answer all the doctor's questions. And so the medical affairs team gathers all of the information, all the data from all the clinical trials, and they give that information to the medical science liaison, who is also a pharmacist, to then present it to the doctor. So pretty much the data that you're presenting to the doctor is very important because they're going to base their treatment off of that data. So that's just another cool role that a pharmacist can play, but that's different. So if you're going to go into that route, you would go into a fellowship. And if you're going to go into the clinical pharmacist side, then you're going to go towards a residency.
So this next question is a little bit related to the topic of workforce. And so the question is, what are your perspectives about the job market in pharmacy? As a first gen, it is a bit concerning when I hear that the job market in pharmacy is becoming saturated.
So honestly, I think I've heard that ever since like starting undergraduate school, like in 2011. None of us have entered the workforce. I'm going to say maybe it's really tough to tell, but I think what I've always heard is, yes, it's saturated, like in urban areas like San Francisco, LA. But if you're willing or interested to work in more rural areas, there is a large need. There is a large need for pharmacists. I think right now, as I'm going through my residency process, a lot of the programs I've talked to, they do say that they have gotten a lot of applicants this year. So just by that alone, it does show that more people are interested in pharmacy, are going into the field of pharmacy. But like I said, there is a great need, especially if you are bilingual and you are culturally competent to work with certain populations. I think there's a huge advantage in that. And employers want that. They want to provide better health for their Spanish-speaking underserved patients.
So this question is also from the chat. How was each of your experiences with applying to scholarships and overall just funding the cost of pharmacy school?
For me personally, I don't have any scholarships. I did recently apply to some for our school. Our scholarship window is kind of during our winter break. And so last year, when it was a scholarship window, I got married. And so that was like during that time of the scholarship when I got married and I had my honeymoon. So I didn't get to apply during that time. But for me, I'm just taking out loans, and my husband is an incoming he's an ICU nurse, and he's starting medical school this fall, and he's going to be taking out loans too. So yeah, I definitely think that if you can find scholarship opportunities, it would be a great idea. Also, another thing is if you're applying to pharmacy school, what I did was like look at the cost of different schools, and that's kind of how I decided also where I was going to apply. I know like the UC schools are generally a little bit less expensive because they are public schools. So I definitely would look at that as well.
I have another question from the chat, and it says, what advice do you currently give to community college students wanting to go into pharmacy, both personally and academically?
So a community college student wanting to go into pharmacy school? That was the question.
Yeah, so what advice would you give to community college students that want to go into pharmacy?
Okay. Well, like I had mentioned earlier, there were a few students in my class that had done community college and they did all of their prerequisites at a community college. And so that's one way to get into pharmacy school. You can, but look into what schools, since there are about 14 pharmacy schools in California, look into which ones are actually, will accept those classes. Now, if you're a community college student right now and you are trying to get into undergraduate school, I would recommend to, if you can start working, maybe that'll be a good time to start working and get some experience, see if you really want to go into pharmacy. And then once you go into undergraduate school, then, you know, continue to pursue that, and you already have a job, right? So you can work as an undergrad and be an undergraduate student. And then you just be a really strong candidate with a lot of pharmacy experience applying into pharmacy school. So you can make it work.
So the next question from the chat is, any tips on how to prepare for pharmacy school interviews?
Something that I did was I ended up researching all the most commonly asked pharmacy interview questions, and then I looked up specifically to my school, tried to Google that and see what came up, and then I knew that they would ask me most likely why I wanted to go to that school and also know why I was interested in pharmacy. So what I tried to do was kind of, type on a Google Doc all my thoughts about what I was going to say, and then just try to go over those and try not to memorize it, because I noticed that when I was practicing and trying to memorize it, if I would mess up, then it would kind of kick me out of whatever I was saying in the moment, and it just wasn't working. And so what really helped me was also to practice with a friend. So I would just have my friend ask me those questions, and then I would just kind of give my responses. And I ended up noticing that during my interview, it wasn't as, at least for my school, it was very casual. It was kind of like a casual conversation. And I've even sat in on those interviews as an interviewee myself. And I know when I'm just sitting on the panels, I'm just kind of, looking to talk to the person who I'm interviewing and kind of get to know more about them and just see if how their communication is, and, not really analyzing anything that they're saying, just trying to hear their story and see how passionate they are for the pharmacy field and why they want to become a pharmacist.
And it sounds cliche, but just be yourself and stay true to your mission. I think before applying to pharmacy school, everything that I had done up to then, working with teens at Planned Parenthood, working with middle-aged Spanish-speaking women who went to get their breast exams and pap smears there, kind of showed my interviewers what my mission was, and everything else, every other little thing that I did, like mentoring in LA, mentoring high school students from underserved communities. All of that just kind of built my resume a certain way and let them know, okay, this is what my goal is this is what my goals are in pharmacy school. This is a population I want to work with when I become a pharmacist. And I think they kind of saw that the genuine, my genuine character. And I think that definitely helped a lot.
Sorry, if it's okay, I'd like to jump back and provide a little bit more for the last two questions that were asked about the community pharmacy as well as the funding really fast. For the community pharmacy, for the community college student, I noticed that for the classes that for prerequisites, I will double check and make sure that they do meet the requirements in terms of for the school, because I know when I did a community class, I had to make sure that it was equivalent to it. So if you want to transfer it to a state, or if you want it to be, hold it up more of a reputation, I guess, for the class, I definitely compare and make sure that the prereqs, everything meets it, and the school does meet it, because I did find that as an issue with community classes, just to make sure that it is equivalent. And then for the funding, I can speak more about it if there's any more questions, but as an undocumented student, I did have a lot of issues in terms of trying to get funding, because I couldn't get no federal funding. I had to go through private loans, scholarships, and sponsorships. So they're more difficult. Luckily, UCSF is a public school, so they had many more opportunities. I find it that private schools are very difficult in terms of getting that types of funding. So you're practically on your own in a way, trying to get, build a GoFundMe, trying to get some sort of funding. I know that USC, Loma Linda, majority of the ones I applied were private school, besides UCSF was a public school. So yeah, for those private schools, really majority of them at the time really didn't know, I think, what an undocumented student was or how to even support them. UCSF was probably the only one that I noticed had a structure for the students and how to navigate that system. But yeah, funding was a lot different. I had to go through private loans. I'm happy to share any other information if that's asked and how I navigated that.
Another question that was asked is, what does a normal day look like as a pharmacist/pharmacy student?
I can speak for the normal day of the pharmacy student. Before I have, because I do have to leave in a bit, but the normal day of a pharmacy student at Western U, I know for sure, you have class from 8 to, I think it was 3 p.m. That's when you're doing didactic, and it is a 4-year program. So you're doing that for 2.5 years. And your first year, you do have a mixture of class and rotations. So for the morning, you're in class until 12, then you have a lunch break, and you have a rotation from 1 to 6 p.m. So it's pretty hard. And then if you're trying to manage a job with that, you're trying to find which day can I fit it in. But you don't have the rotation the entire year. You have it for, I think it's 6 weeks. So yeah, life of a student at Western U from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. or 6 p.m. if you have rotations, while trying to stay active and trying to, join organizations and having a job. For after that, after didactic and you go on to rotations, it's a little bit more chill depending on what rotation you're on. I had a rotation, since it was virtual, it was community rotation. I only met with my preceptor about 3 hours every week. So I was able to work full time during that time. I shouldn't really be saying that, but I mean, what can you do on a virtual community rotation? But for the other rotations, like my emergency medicine rotation, that was a tough one. You can probably expect to have some preceptors that are really passionate about teaching. So this preceptor was very passionate, and he wanted me to do a topic discussion every single day, work up the patients in the ICU, and then present them to him. And during that, also having to learn other things because he was going to pop quiz me during the rotation, and my rotation was a 10-hour rotation, 4 days a week. So I was just trying to keep up and manage everything. That was a pretty rough rotation. So it can vary depending on what type of preceptor you have. But yeah, that's my take. I think it's pretty exciting and it's pretty fun. And just if you're willing to learn, you're going to love it. But with that said, I do have to leave. I have a project to work on, but it was great hearing, and it was nice to meet all the other mentors. So hopefully we can all connect. Okay.
I think to elaborate a little bit more on that, my experience at pharmacy school has been a little different since I started virtually automatically because of COVID. So everything's been online for the most part, just Zoom all day, like Yvonne said, from like 8 to 3 times Wednesdays until 5. And then we still go on rotations. We have had opportunities to go to campus, such as like when we got certified to give immunizations or when we have to do our physical examinations, stuff like that. But for the most part, it's all virtual, which has been a little challenging in its way. But it's good because I don't have to commute to school and I can just lay on my bed during break. But it has been challenging because I do feel like you miss out on a lot of things. You have a hard time connecting with your peers. You have a hard time connecting with your faculty. So I do feel my experience has been a little different than everybody else's.
So UCSF is a 3-year program, and Rudy, please in as I'm talking if I forget anything. But so UCSF is a 3-year program. Our first 2 years are didactic, so we are in the classroom, and our last year we are doing rotations. During our first year, usually first and second year, usually classes are from 9 to 4 or 5, but the days vary. Sometimes you have shorter days, sometimes you have longer days. On one day of the week, you're usually on your first year, you're usually on a community rotation. So you're out in the community, like at a Walgreens, CVS, or at a local community pharmacy doing, you're there the whole day as an intern. Your second year, you are also doing the didactic, but there's also one day a week where you go to the hospital to do an inpatient. Personally, I had 2 jobs while in pharmacy school. So my first 2 years, I had 2 jobs. And it was definitely doable because those jobs weren't too demanding. So yeah, I don't know, Rudy, do you have anything to add in about our career? So it's a little bit different, but I do appreciate the way it is structured, where it's in blocks. So every single is a new body system, like for example, cardiovascular, and then we move to GI and then ID. I do appreciate that because we get all of that information all at once. So all of the physiology, all of the pharmacology, everything is there and you kind of don't forget it.
It was a great summary of our curriculum in terms of how it's changed. And definitely for us, since we were the first cohort, it's definitely has changed ever since. They learned a lot from our experience. But like as you mentioned, I definitely do like how they broke it down into different blocks in the body systems. It helped us in terms of focus a lot more on what or medications to look out for in the area. And then as it goes on and advances into different blocks, those medications return because they're not only used for one thing, they can be used for other things. So, you know, that's the good thing about it, that you look at them all over and over again. And that's what I really liked about the program's curriculum in terms of how they formatted that. And I think they also mentioned something about like rotations in a way, and how it's, so Nora and I are on rotations right now. So we can probably talk a little bit about how that's going. I know for UCSF, it's eight in total, but they have 4 for the core and then 4 that are elective, so you can kind of choose whichever you want. Thus far, for like a full day, kind of depends what area you're at. I can probably say from the acute care aspect, when I was going into the ICU, I had to drive an hour because the place that I was located at was far from me, and I didn't want to relocate, so I drove an hour. So I practically woke up around 5 or 6 a.m., drove there, got there at 7. I didn't really start till 8 because I had to look at patient charts and see, work them up in terms of what medications they're going through, what to look out for. So I really started until 8. Then I went from 8 up until 5:30 or so, morning rounds with the physicians and everyone else that's in the care team. So we went up to like 8, up to 5:30 or so, drove home about an hour or so, and you still have projects on the side. Just aside from working full time during that whole week, you still have projects on the side that are part of that rotation site. They give you, topic discussions where you go over certain body system or certain disease that they want you to do. It depends on each rotation site. They might want you to do 3 a week, 2 a week, or 1 a day. And it gets time consuming because you really have to, ensure that you have time management, you have self-care as well. You're not, indulging in so much stress at that time. So there's a lot going on in terms of when you're on rotations when it's a full time. There's some rotations that are very chill, like a community pharmacy ones are really nice. You have a lot more time, but there's more intense ones like in the hospital system that are really more intense. And then I'll let Nora add on to a little bit more about that.
I think just one last thing that UCSF, I'm not sure how it is with the other pharmacy schools, but we get to rank the location of our rotation. So for example, Rudy and I are in the Fresno area right now. I'm actually doing all of my rotations either here in Delano, where I'm from, or in Visalia. There's other students in the Sacramento area, then there's others in the LA area, and some in the San Francisco area and North Bay area. So we kind of have a choice, but not really, because we rank those, and based off of those rankings and basically the whole student preference, they place us.
All right, so we do want to be mindful of all of your times, and thank you again so much for being here, answering questions. So this will most likely be one of our last questions. And it is, I know some of you mentioned already that the transition from undergrad was a challenge, but what are some of the most difficult aspects or expectations of pharmacy school, and how can I overcome feelings of self-doubt and fear of not being able to perform well in pharmacy school?
I think for me personally, so going from high school to undergrad, it was a huge shock to me, and I didn't perform as well as I wanted to, and as well as I had been in high school. So after UCLA, I was just super discouraged, and even going into pharmacy school, I was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't do so well in undergrad, it's gonna be the same thing in pharmacy school. I'm not gonna perform well, but surprisingly, I mean, when you're in pharmacy school, you're actually learning what you are interested in learning, what you want to learn, and that makes it so much better. It's makes me like even excited to learn all of these things. Um, I I would spend hours. I think even Rudy and I would actually spend hours in the library before exams, just going through mechanisms and just talking it out. Um, so that definitely helped. But honestly, I don't think pharmacy school has been as stressful for me as undergrad school was.
For me, I had a hard time adjusting in undergrad because, like I said earlier, I am a first generation student and the oldest student. So I was the first to move out, and I was 17 as well, and I moved out on campus. So it was a big change for me, and just being away from home and, you know, living with roommates who may not live the same way that you do, as well as just the classes were difficult. So I had a hard time in undergrad, and sometimes I could be overly ambitious. So I was trying to add a lot of things. I kept my same job that I had in high school. So I would go home on the weekends and work and then see my parents. And then when I was on campus, I was volunteering at a local hospital and doing research. It was just way too much that I was trying to do at once. And I just wasn't prioritizing the classes. And then adjusting to pharmacy school, I did have that 2-year gap. And I think in my first semester, I kind of had an adjustment period because I had to figure out, since I hadn't taken classes intensely in a while, had to really figure out what study method worked for me. And it was kind of a big shock because of how much time I was putting into studying. When I had gone to like an event where all the accepted students came in and we sat with um, students that were currently at the school, and I had talked to this girl. I was like, like how many hours do you study a day? She's like, oh, like realistically, I probably should study like 4 hours a day, but I only study like 2 hours a day. I sleep like 12 hours. And I was like, okay, so I got this. And it was not that at all. I was definitely not sleeping as much last year, especially the first semester. I was probably, before every quiz exam, sleeping from 12 to 4 in the morning. And it was just not good. Along with the personal, I was getting married in December. So I was still like planning the wedding. Nothing was done because I was in school, and everybody's like, how's wedding planning? I was like, just don't ask me. So it's just a lot of things at once. But I think once I was really able to get my study methods down, that kind of was like a game changer for me. And I think it's definitely true. Like, you get the grades that you get from the work that you put into it. Um, for me, I think the word smart isn't anything. I think it's just people are hardworking and you really have to put the work into it. And so I think that's kind of what made the difference for me. And I've kept the same study habit throughout my first 2 years, and it's been working for me since. And I think that I've had a fairly great time in pharmacy school. And like Nora says, you're learning stuff that you really enjoy. So my first year, I was learning stuff relating to more the community pharmacy. So when I was working at CVS, I was really enjoying putting that knowledge to practice and counseling patients on, their medications there. And now that I'm in my second year, I'm learning more like in hospital stuff like fluid resuscitations and ACLS protocols and critical care management and stuff that when I go to shadow, I can use that into practice there. So yeah.
Cool. I can say for myself, the transition was quite interesting. I was transitioning from a from Fresno State, so it's a quarter. It was a semester system to a quarter system, so a little bit more fast paced at UCSF. And it recently had transitioned to a 3-year program from a 4-year, so it's a lot fast paced in terms of the classes as well. So that was quite the interesting thing, as well as moving from a different city, from Fresno to San Francisco, kind of came this level of independence with it. So definitely the transition was tough at the beginning, but as you go along with your classmates, you're all into one cohort, and you all have classes together. Well, me and Nora had classes together with everybody else. You gain friends, you make friends, and together you can do activities, and slowly but surely you adjust. So the transition is difficult at first, but you get there, and you become part of that program.
Thank you all so much for this really great presentation and advice that y'all provided to the participants. Just to close out, the event, is there one piece of advice that you would like to provide for this panel of students? We can start probably alphabetical. So Leslie, and then Nora, and then Rodolfo and Jocelyn after.
So one piece of advice that I would say that I've always kind of held during pharmacy school is never compare yourself to others. It's easy to see, what other people are doing. I know when I was applying to inpatient jobs, there is a limited number of jobs, and so many pharmacy schools with students that, want 4 jobs. And I know I was like, what am I not doing right? Like, how can I improve? Or why is this person doing this and why can't I get it? And so, your time will come, and just don't compare yourself to others. It's your own journey.
So my piece of advice would be not to ever be discouraged. If you want to become a pharmacist, you will become a pharmacist. If you think that, oh, I cannot handle the workload, yes, you will be able to handle the workload. And as I mentioned previously, stay true to your mission. There aren't a lot of Latinx pharmacists. There's not a lot of pharmacists who are willing to go to rural areas. And that's where our people need help. And the more help we can get, the better.
Yeah, definitely. This is gonna sound cliche, but follow your heart, man. If you really want to get into pharmacy, you're passionate about this area, echarle ganas, si se puede, you can do it. It's possible, you set your mind to it. And definitely, if it's something that you're interested in, or if you want to find out more about it, do some research, put yourself out there. I think we all did that in one way or form, and we find that pharmacy is something that we want to do, and we'll find passionate about. So if that's something you want to do, yeah, definitely put yourself out there, but it's possible.
Like I mentioned before, I think it's very important to ask for help when you need help, because I know, well, I was always taught to be independent, be strong, do it on your own. But I think that's what really led, not to my downfall, but sort of like for me not to succeed as much as I wanted to in UC Berkeley, because I was so ashamed to ask for help. So definitely don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to stand up for yourself and what you want. And definitely, like everybody said, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Like everybody said, just stick to what you want to do, and there's no set path for anything. So if you want to do it, you can do it. Believe in yourself.
And that's a really great way to close out this event. So thank you all to these amazing panelists. So this event was recorded, and it will be uploaded into our YouTube channel in a couple weeks. I did put in the event, the survey, the post-event survey for folks here to fill out. By filling that survey out, you'll be helping us a lot just to sort of see how we can improve future webinars. So please do that. And then afterwards, once you complete it, I'll go ahead and share that contact information. So thank you everybody for joining us tonight, and have a great rest of your week. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you
Bye,
for having us.
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody, take care.
Thank you.